welcome to North Shore Crafts Punch Needle Corner. Today we're going to learn how to punch needle with yarn thickness. This is not embroidery punch needle, this is yarn thickness. So here we go. And I'd like to take some time first of all to explain the differences between embroidery punch needle and yarn thickness punch needle. There's a huge difference, and a lot of the things that you see out there when you see punch needle, some of them are with embroidery and some of them are with yarn thickness. And the difference is the tools and the fabric and how it looks. So this right here is embroidery punch needle. This is an embroidery punch needle called the Ultra Punch. And it has a very thin needle, and as you can see, this is embroidery floss, and it's very, very little loops. A lot of very little loops. And that's the way I tell, honestly, is looking at the loops in the project. So that's what I'm trying to convey here. So this is yarn thickness here, and this is embroidery. They're a lot smaller, and there's a lot more of them. There's less of these. So this takes a lot more punching. So if you have a big project, this would take a really long time. These are more for pillows and rugs. You want the yarn thickness. And this is done with Oxford number 10 regular. And this is done with the Ultra Punch. I'm not going to go into detail on the frames and the fabrics and the tools that are available. If you want more information on that, head over to www.northshorecrafts.com and go to the Start Here section. And I go through all of the tools available, all of the foundation fabrics, the frames you can use, why you would want to use one frame versus another frame. It's all there. So head over there for that information. Today we're going to use the Oxford number 10 regular, Monk's cloth, and then this is a Nerge number 5 and wooden embroidery hoop. You can get all of those at my shop, www.northshorecrafts.com. Okay, so to start, you thread your needle. So here's our tool, and we have some yarn here. So to thread the Oxford, you stick your thread in the eye of the needle until you can pull it with the other hand, and then you hold this up here with your fingers as you take this tail and push it down, pull it tight so it kind of starts going in there, and then once it's in there a little bit, you just pull this section and it will feed the rest of the way through. And then you don't need that much of a tail, so you can fix it. So I'll do that once more. You put your needle, your thread in the eye of the needle, pull it through with your fingers, pull it tight here, and then use this tail to pull it down into the handle and then pull it through, and it is threaded. Now when we go to punch needle, we are going to have this point the direction we're working so your yarn stays in your handle. Otherwise it can come out and pull and it doesn't look as pretty. To start, you're going to punch in the middle of your fabric. You'll want to usually start in the middle of a design. So here you can see this was my design. I started in the middle. I don't have a design on the rest of it. I'm just showing you, so I'm just going in the middle of the fabric work. And then you're going to want to pull your yarn tail out because it makes for easier trimming at the end. And then from here, I'm just going to show you what it looks like in fast motion, and then I will go into detail. Basically, your hand is like a sewing machine. This is your needle of your sewing machine, and you're just making the yarn go into the fabric so it makes little stitches on this side. And then if you look on the other side, it makes loops. And the reason for that is because as you punch in, your needle pulls enough yarn out that when you pull it back through, it leaves some of it in there. So it makes a loop. And then as you work, your fabric gets closer and closer together because you're pushing yarn in between the strands, and it will hold it super tight because all of your strands of your fabric are pushed together and it makes a tight hold. So that is the basics of punch needle. Just making stitches that in turn make loops on the other end. So now from there I'm going to show you the tips and tricks of punch needle. When I go, you will see that I use controlled motions. I'm not taking my hand way out here and going like this. I'm not doing that, because once, as you see, when you do that, it then pulls your yarn out, so then the loop won't stay. So your hand is the motor of the sewing machine, controlling the needle and making it go into the fabric. And that is the first tip of punch needle. Make sure your tip of your needle grazes your fabric. You don't want it to be pulled up here, because then the loop will come out, or you'll make loops on this side and then your loops on the other side will not be even. And then the other tip is to make sure the handle of your needle touches the fabric each time. And the reason for that is that if your handle touches this each time, then the same amount of yarn is being expelled on the other side. So it will make for even loop lengths. If you didn't put it all the way through, then you wouldn't have as much yarn go through on this side, and you would have smaller loops on one side or the other. If you can do that, you can basically do any punch needle project. You just fill in, you're basically just coloring in a section with yarn. So make sure the handle touches the fabric each time, and your tip of your needle grazes the fabric each time. Another one of the most important tips that I even sometimes get caught doing, and I see my students do the most, is not a loose yarn tail. Sometimes when you're working, you can get the yarn stuck in your hand like this, and then when that happens, it becomes tight in here, and if the yarn can't get through here, then it won't make a loop. So you want to make sure that you have a nice loose yarn tail as you work. Don't trap it in your shirt or with your hand or wherever you're working. And then to turn corners, you simply turn the needle in the fabric and face it the other way. Go back. It is a good trick to go offset your stitches, which means you'll have I call it a mountain. So your hump of your stitch, you're gonna go in the middle of the hump of the stitch for your next row. And then after that, to end, you pull out your thread, trim it, pull out your needle all of the way, and then you will have all of these little yarn tails, and that's pretty normal. So you don't have to make any knots. Like I said before, the fabric pushes together and it holds all of your loops, including the end of your loop. So you don't have to not make any knots or anything like that. So when you're done and you have these yarn tails, all you go through is you just take your scissors and you trim it so it's hiding within your other loops. These are kind of on the outside, so this is a little bit different. But you just trim them so you can't see them in your piece. Just like that. And that also means if you ever get one of your loops, sometimes your needle will grab one of these loops as you're working and it will make an extra bump, or you'll have little yarns sticking out everywhere. If that ever happens, then you also just go ahead and trim them out just like you do the yarn tails. And that's it. So then you would fill in your area and go to your next color and finish your design.